It's great to see all of you, and it's very moving for me to get up here first and speak to all of you, and I'm here because I insisted to Alexandra that I be the first person to speak, and you know, after you, right? Well, everything is after Alexandra, you know. We're in the AA era at Sarah Lawrence, the after Alexandra era. And, you know, I was just out in Irvine giving a reading. Michael Ryan had invited me there, and we went out to dinner after my reading, and I said, you know, of the two people sitting at this table, I've known Tom the longest. And he said, no, you haven't. I've known him since 1971. And I wanted to throw him into the Pacific Ocean, which is right near Irvine. I was so, you know, annoyed by that. And but I met Tom in 1974, and I was 19. It was the second semester of my senior year in college, and I had had a very strange academic career, and had emerged sort of in the middle of the first semester of my senior year in college going, oh shit, what am I going to do with my life? And I had always secretly wanted to be a poet, and I'd been a mathematics major, and I drifted over into philosophy. And Tom Lux was at Oberlin that year. He'd just come from Iowa, where he'd been editing the Iowa Review. And the poet at Oberlin at that time, David Young, had gone to England on a sabbatical, and they'd hired Tom to replace him. And, you know, in the long continuity of Tom's life and his interaction with American poetry and his structural importance to the history of American poetry of the past 45 years or so, one has to remember that he was famous young. You know, he was kind of really well-known young. And you know, in 1974, how old was he? He was 27, but he had already kind of established not only his presence in American poetry, but a real distinctive individual voice. And everyone was aware already of the charisma which he carried with him through the end of his life. And you know, I was kind of furiously scribbling away at poems, and during registration for second semester, I asked him if I could be a part of his workshop, and I had never kind of encountered him before that. And he read the poems and he said, the workshop is full, but I'm thinking of starting a little independent study with 3 or 4 of you, you know. And this was like, you know, this is like Tom's, you know, endless pedagogical improvisation. And I said, okay, can I be a part of that? And so he let me be a part of it, and he really liked my poems, and I didn't really know what to do. I was so lost and so confused, and you know, I didn't feel like I had a place or a purchase in society, and Tom really sort of gave me a bridge that I could cross over into my adult life, and my gratitude to him even then was immense. And the independent study was a kind of irregular independent study. You know, we were supposed to meet, and then we would kind of get together in various places, you know. And but you know, Tom, of course, was always a moving target. And Tom was peregrine, right? He would range and range and range, but he'd always circle back, you know, in his whole life. I mean, I think everyone here had that experience of him, that he never abandoned you, no matter how far away he went. And, you know, and I was always searching the Oberlin campus for Tom. That's what I remember my spring year being, that I was like this little puppy with a poem in my mouth, like trotting around looking for Tom, and then I'd corner him and I'd say, Tom, I have a poem. And he'd say, okay, I'll read the poem. And then he'd sit there and talk about the poem, and he'd praise the poem to me, and he'd not only praise the poem to me, but to other people. So, Oberlin had a very strong poetic culture then. Bruce Weigel was there, and Franz was there, and they all kind of, Franz Wright, and they all kind of heard of me through Tom, and so they'd come around and say, who the fuck are you, man? I don't know, I'm just like, I got this poem. And then he'd see me walking around, and, I'd be in the cafeteria, and I'd be carrying around, the transcendence of the ego and stuff like that. And he'd say, because I read philosophy, and he'd say, man, you got to stop reading that stuff. You know what Coleridge said? He said philosophy destroyed his poetic ability. Do you know what Coleridge said, VG? I was like, no, I don't know what Coleridge said. But I kind of, but then I would follow him around, and that was my initial encounter. And he told me then that I should go on, and that he would recommend me to MFA programs. And I didn't take him up on it then, but I kept in touch with him, and I sent him poems when I decided at the end of the 1970s that I was going to do this seriously. And he paved the way to my graduate education. And then about 15 years later, when I was kind of cornered in the New York literary world and didn't feel I had any options but a life I didn't want to live, I called him up, and he said, well, you can come up here and teach as a guest. And after I got up here, he made sure I had the opportunities to stay here. And so through all of the crises of my adult life, Tom Lux has been there. And some might call it coincidence, but he is one of the few people in my life who kind of transposes and reverses the normal explanations I have for my own experience. He's someone who I feel was the major avenue and operation of grace in my life, in the largest and most capacious sense you can think of the word grace. And his loss is devastating to me, as I know it is for many, many people here. And but I can't praise him enough for, and you have to remember, he was this weird Indian kid at a time when there were no Indians around, right? And he had no particular ideology that I ever discovered in him, but he had an innate, instinctive understanding of the dignity of other human beings, and he responded to that, and it was just so natural and second nature to him. And, I'll be grateful to him all my life, and I'll think about him every day.
So I'll bring up Claudia now, and as I said before, as you come up in the order, just say your name so we know who you are. Claudia.
Hi, I'm Claudia Lux, Tom's daughter. I'm wearing these on my wrist so I can snap myself in case I start to cry. Just letting you all know that, and I can't look at any of you in the face because I will cry, so I'm just going to look down at my phone like the rest of my generation. Okay, so I'm going to be just saying a few words, and then I'm going to read a poem by my dad. It's already starting. Okay. My father believed in humility and hard work. He believed in giving relentlessly. He believed in reading often and alone. He believed that if you felt the need to write, then you needed to write, but you always needed to work at it. That's the Thomas Lux everyone knows and loves. To me, he was all of those things, but he was also just my father. The man who was actually pretty proud of me when I told a girl in my 3rd grade class that she was going to hell for being a Yankees fan. He acted like he was mad, but I think he was proud. The man who sang the Simpsons theme song whenever we saw a certain type of cloud. The man who was always giving me hell for leaving my voicemail box full. The man who taught me the monkey chased his tail around the flagpole. Anyone remember that from Thomas Lux? Which I actually considered recording as the only music for this entire program, but decided against it, so you're welcome for that. But we could do a sing-along later if anyone else is down, for only about 5 words. The man who, due to geography, I became comfortable missing because I knew that wherever he was missing me too. I don't know how to miss him this way. I can feel it in my whole body, like I'm half as full as I used to be. He always talked about how we shared the same blood. He liked the metaphor and the science. My flesh and my blood, my daughter. And I've always been proud of that, to be his daughter. I lift my head whenever I say it. I'm Thomas Lux's daughter. I will always be proud to carry in my veins his blood, full of generosity, humor, swagger, and that language-hungry fever that gave the world his poems. I'm going to read a Horatian notion. My dad read this poem at my Sarah Lawrence graduation in 2009. He got up on the stage, and before he could say anything, I shouted out from the sea of caps and gowns, "Hey, Dad!" He loved that. He thought that was pretty funny. This was our home. This was that we were comfortable here. Sarah Lawrence provides that for so many people, a place to feel comfortable, especially for those who haven't felt comfortable elsewhere. He loved that about this school, and so did I. The island of misfit toys, I always said, lovingly, with pride. I want to read this poem because of that memory, and because my dad is the person who made me love the thing. Writing, language, the way it's crafted, the sounds and meanings of words, me and countless others. And when I think about how this feels, missing him, I am out of words. Language doesn't touch it. But I'll keep at it, keep working, keep writing, because it's the thing I love, because he made me love it, because it keeps him close to me. This is a Horatian notion. The thing gets made, gets built, and you're the slave who rolls the log beneath the block, then another, then pushes the block, then pulls the log from the rear back to the front again, and then again it goes beneath the block, and so on. It's how a thing gets made. Not because you're sensitive, or you get genetic lucky, or God says, here's a nice family, 7 children, let's see, this one in charge of the village dunghill, these 2 die of buboes, this one Kierkegaard, this one a drooling nincompoop, this one clerk, this one Cooper. You need to love the thing you do, birdhouse building, painting tulips exclusively, whatever, and then you do it, so consciously driven by your unconscious that the thing becomes a wedge that splits a stone, and between the halves the wedge then grows, i.e. the thing is solid but with a soul, a life of its own. Inspiration, the donné, the gift, the bolt of fire down the arm that makes the art. Grow up. Give me, please, a break. You make the thing because you love the thing. And you love the thing because someone else loved it enough to make you love it. And with that, your heart, like a tent peg pounded towards the earth's core, and with that, your heart on a beam burns through the ionosphere, and with that, you go to work.
That was beautiful, Claudia. I'd just like to have a show of hands. Who here, whose life was changed by Thomas Lux? See? I mean, what he could do, what that man could do. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Laurent Basselar, and I was Tom's buddy, Tom's knucklehead, cupcake, bug soup, crocodile shit. I mean, and I was married to the poet Kurt Brown, who was his buddy too. I'm going to try to say it as simply as I can. I loved Tom Lux. I loved him a lot. So anyway, I don't have an elastic. He asked me to teach at a summer workshop for the first time in my life, teaching in America. He was my mentor at Sarah Lawrence College, and I would write these long European-infused, complicated and adverb and adjective-rich poems, and then he would send them back to me, I swear. He would send them back to me, and he'd cross out 3 stanzas, and next to it, it would be written N-A-H. Nah. That's not funny. He was my teacher, he was my friend, he was my best buddy. And after that conference, he had been talking about pronunciation and put the words in your mouth and taste them and then put them on the page. All right, so I wrote him an acrostic. It's called, acrostic is a poem that's where the first letter of each line is the letters of the person's name. So it's T-H-O-M-A-S and then L-U-X. And I wrote him an acrostic with a sort of salute to my buddy. Acrostic deluxe. Triple syllable word zapper. Article hexer. Red Sox fan. Book ogre. Skeet shooter. Word monger. Metaphor man. Articulator. Bat swinger. Crane lover, huge heart. Here's to that ticker up Clock Street. Here's to his xanthus locks. Xanthus means golden it's in the dictionary. Try to write lux. It's hard to that X. Okay. And then Tom left us. And I wrote this. It's called Lux, from the Latin light. That rain, all day, no light, and that rain. It trails me to work through streets and traffic, weeps against windshields and windows. What is it that shadows me so? It trails me to work through streets and traffic, clings to me, insists he's gone. What is it that shadows me so? This rush of rain, a constant shush, clings to me, insists he's gone. He's gone. And you so far away. This rush of rain, a constant shush, wanes before I can make sense of it. He's gone. And you so far away. In the sky of steel just now, a scythe of light wanes before I can make sense of it. That light, a shiver in every drop. In the sky of steel just now, a scythe of light weeps against windshields and windows. That light, a shiver in every drop. That rain, all day, no light, and that rain. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jean Kilbourne, and my claim to fame is that I'm Claudia Lux's mother. Tom and I met in 1973 at Emerson College. I was teaching at Emerson College, and he was the poet in residence. We were assigned to teach a creative writing course together, which we planned over shots of Jack Daniels at a local dive. He just published Memory's Hand Grenade, his first book, and he was a young man on fire. We fell in love, and long story short, we were together for a while. We broke up over 20 years period, and then we reunited, and we were married for 10 years. I never knew a man who wanted a child more than Tom did. And in particular, he wanted a daughter. Claudia's birth was so monumental that he wrote in red ink in his journal that day for the first time ever. He got the daughter he wanted, and he was always so immensely proud of her. Claudia shares so much with him, her passion for reading and writing, imagination, wit, her good heart, and of course her beautiful long blonde hair. As many of you know, Tom grew up on a dairy farm in western Massachusetts. His father was a milkman, his mother a telephone operator. He was so different from his parents, and yet he shared some of their traits: loyalty, generosity, his father's gentleness, his mother's intensity. Claudia and I stayed close to his parents until the end of their lives. They were married for over 65 years, and they died within 6 months of each other. Tom took very good care of them at the end, as did Claudia. He was a complicated man with many contradictions. Such a wordsmith, such a lover of language, and yet completely incapable of learning a foreign one. He almost didn't graduate from high school because he could not meet the foreign language requirement. One summer, we spent some time in a small village in Greece. The Greek word for good morning is kalimera. So we would walk through the village in the morning, and Tom would greet all the old ladies in black and say, calamari. Calamari, which of course means squid. They thought he was hilarious, and they adored him. He read more than anyone else I've ever known. One could feel quite often around Tom that he would rather be reading. Takes a while to get that right, but some of you know. One time, he actually got up and left in the middle of a dinner party. He just vanished, and I found him reading in another room. Now, that was bad enough, but it was our dinner party. So I wanted to kill him at the time, but now, of course, I think it's funny. He was incredibly funny, as you all know, but he was never mean. His humor was never mean, and he never, ever laughed at his own witty remarks. When I hit a moose and totaled my car, he wrote a very touching and hilarious poem called Wife Hits Moose. I said when I'd married him, I wanted to be immortalized, not humiliated throughout time, but... One evening we were making dinner, and I said, oh my God, we have no green vegetables. I forgot the green vegetables. And he looked at me and said, your mom's dead, and my mom's not here. And when Claudia was accepted to Sarah Lawrence and complained some about how few men there were here, he suggested that if she wanted to be around more men, she could join the army. Our marriage didn't last, but our love for each other did. I'm so glad he found happiness with Jenny at the end of his life. She took such good care of him. And I'm glad that Jenny and Claudia have become such good friends. I know that made Tom very happy. A few years ago, Claudia was on the subway in New York, and she looked up, and there was a poem by her dad. And furthermore, it was written to her. It was A Little Tooth, which some of you know. Imagine, on the subway in New York. Now, it takes a lot of courage to read a poem by Thomas Lux. So this is short, and it's important, so I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to take the risk. So, your baby grows a tooth, then 2, and 4, and 5. Then she wants some meat directly from the bone. It's all over. She'll learn some words. She'll fall in love with cretins, dolts, a sweet talker on his way to jail. And you, your wife, get old, fly-blown, and rue nothing. You did, you loved, your feet are sore. It's dusk, your daughter's tall. One of the last things he said to me was, our daughter's tall, and so she is. I loved him with all my heart.
Hey guys, I'm Travis Denton,
I'm Katie Chapel.
and we're not Laurel and Hardy.
If we are, I'm the skinny one.
Of course, that's true. Vijay, I had read, and I think we talked a little bit ago about you saying that Tom offered you protection, and that's so true of so many in this room. He offered us protection from academia or from just those voices that made us maybe feel bad about our writing or whatever. But he offered us that protection. It was just absolutely wonderful. And Claudia, you mentioned that you said once that Yankees fans were going to go to hell, and absolutely. But Tom would have said actually that they were assholes, and he would go even further and say that's why we should make them our friends and be good to them, and that's so many days being in the office, and I worked with Tom for so many years, and so many days people would come in and they wouldn't act the way we wanted them to act, and it was like well let's give them something. Let's be extra nice and see what happens, and so we did, and a lot of good things came from that, and such. But I wanted to share a bit of a memory of Tom that comes right here from Sarah Lawrence. The first time I was here in about 2007 for the summer conference. I came up here, and Tom had all these expectations of everybody from the South could hit a softball over the fence. And it was my job to knock a window out in said building that was beyond the fence. And so, there was like some person like lobbing these balls at me, and they were coming really slow, and I was swinging, and they were going like right through my bat. And I could not hit a ball. And after that, we get back to Georgia. And you're laughing.
Sorry.
You're laughing at this, but
Practice was needed.
Practice was needed. And so this is an example of Tom's teaching outside the classroom. And we get back to Atlanta, and he goes, "Hey T, I need some batting practice. I need to kind of maintain for next." And he called it, I'm going to maintain for next year at Sarah Lawrence. He goes, do you know a batting cage? We can go and and hit some balls. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know this. Not that I'd ever been, obviously, but so we went. We were hitting balls and we were hitting home runs in there. And we came back to back here to Sarah Lawrence the next year. Hitting them out of the park. So. Thank you, Tom. I can hit a ball, a softball. But, goodness. But another thing that I wanted to mention is Tom was so thrilled to bring poetry to so many people. And one thing that he did every single day is to come into the office. And we brought this, of course, Claudia had given this to Tom. It's Homer Simpson. Every day he would come into the office and he would hit that, and it was. Every day was the greatest day of his life because he knew that he was going to come in and he was going to, teach poetry to people who were focused on discrete mathematics and airplane design and, and solving quadratic equations, which is like 8th grade math, but now. Anyway, so I have a poem. If I can have my glasses here, I can read it. So I have a poem called Motel Seedy, and Tom wrote this, pretty early in his career, and it wasn't true, later on, because he really liked fancy hotel rooms, right? I mean, he liked them as fancy as they were. And that's what's so beautiful about this poem. Another thing that's beautiful is he's the only person that I know ever who could make the word puce sound really sexy. I get a little hot over this, but okay, Motel Seedy. The artisans of this room who designed the lamp base, a huge red slug with a hole where its heart should be, or chose this print of a butterscotch sunset, must have been abused in art class as children, forced to finger paint with nose or tongue. To put this color green, exhausted grave grass. To cinder blocks takes an understanding of loneliness and or institutions that terrifies. It would seem not smart to create a color scheme in a motel room that's likely to cause impotence in men and open sores in women. But that's why this puce bedspread with its warty, ratty tufts could do. It complements the towels, torn and holding awful secrets like the cell on a life raft loaded with blackened, half-eaten corpses. I think I owned this desk once. I think this chair is where I sat with the help wanted ad spread and wobbling before me as I looked for jobs to lead me upward. To rooms like this in America where I dreamed I lived. Do I deprive tonight the beautician and her lover, a showerhead salesman, of this room? He is so seldom in town. I felt by their glance in the hallway that my room, number 17, means something, don't ask me to explain this, special to them. Maybe they fell fiercely into each other here for the first time. Maybe there was passion preternatural. I'm glad this room, so ugly, has known some love at $19 double occupancy, though not tonight, for $1.50 less.
So this lovely little item has made its way from Georgia to New York, and it's also a very sensitive item, I would like you to know. So when we packed it up, and as you all probably also have heard in the international media, that Georgia's roads have a bit of, bump to them, perhaps. So in my trunk,
This is the greatest day of my life!
has happened more than once, right? And so we packed it up to bring it up here. And yesterday, if you were here in the city at all, you know that there was also quite a lot of rainstorm. So Travis, who has no idea how to hold an umbrella, as far as I can tell, so I'm walking behind him, and the rain is coming down his back, and your jacket is just wet. Soaked, your hair's soaked, etc. And so we get to the restaurant, and I pull up my purse, and I set it in the seat, thinking that this
This is the greatest day of my life!
is totally, secure, is not. So, that's become sort of Tom's voice for us. Right? So we get to a place and soaking wet, and having lunch, and Tom likes to tell us that this is the greatest day of his life. So anyway, so that may be a little bit of the quote-unquote lowbrow of the day. But the other thing is that Tom loved John Keats, and I loved that Tom loved Keats. And so I want to read a poem that he wrote about that. And I will use the, famous quotation marks of Tom's. So Mr. John Keats, 5 feet tall, sails away. On the Maria Crowther, a cargo brig of 127 tons bound for Italy, Naples. The sun, which was thought would cure his cough, his lungs. The day, Sunday, 17 September 1820. With him, Severin, a painter, his nurse companion. Mrs. Pigeon, a pain in the ass, and cold. Miss Cottrell, like Keats, consumptive and very ladylike, but a sad martyr to her illness, wrote Severin, the captain and crew. This was not a pleasure cruise. Second day out, the sick and non-sick get seasick, and bequeath to the mighty sea their breakfasts. Storms, water by the pailful in the sleeping cabin, calms, nary a puff, a squall, Bay of Biscayne, a calm again, Cape St. Vincent. Then one dawn, Gibraltar, the African coast. Then Bay of Naples, Saturday, 21 October, 10 days quarantined, during which not one porthole opened. It rained so hard and long. Welcome, Mr. Keats, to sunny southern Italy. Then by wagon on roads ripe with malaria to Rome, from where in the 2 months plus he still has lungs. He does not write to Fanny Braun, whom he loves, though he does write about her to a friend the famous sentence, "Oh God, God, God," in whom he had no faith. Everything I have in my trunk reminds me and goes through me like a spear. And the better but less quoted next sentence, the silk lining she put in my traveling cap scalds my head. The verb choice, scalds, perfect here. Literally, he had the fever. Figuratively, the tactility fresher, the melodrama cut by an almost comic hyperbole. It is more Keats than Keats, who died 172 years, 8 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days ago. This tiny man, John Keats, who wrote some poems without which, inch by inch, in broken barn light, in classrooms, even there, under the lamp where what you read teaches you what you love, without which we would each, inch by hammered inch, we would each be diminished.
I'm Susan Guma, and I worked with Tom for over 20 years as a partner and in working with the MFA program here and in the summer seminar for writers. And I want to speak, I'm not a writer, I'm probably the only one up here that doesn't write, and so I'm going to talk about what I value so much from Tom as a visionary leader and administrator. Although we know he would not be comfortable with that term because he would not ever think he was one, he clearly had extraordinary vision about how to build this writing program. He was a builder of friendships, mentoring, and community. Directing the Sarah Lawrence MFA program, all those aspects were evident. In his working with others to assemble a group of talented poets with a commitment to teaching, with admitting groups of students whom he and others felt had strong potential for growth, and that was his main criteria. Encouraging students in cross-genre work, always believing that one genre could inform the other, and encouraging them in exploring history, philosophy, science in all that they were working on. creating a community of writers by encouraging the interaction between faculty and students through many readings and social gatherings, working with others to expand the outreach of the Sarah Lawrence community, developing and leading the summer seminar for writers, encouraging the development of our high school writers program, creating opportunities for guest faculty, craft lectures, thesis readings, and supporting opportunities for students to teach. Always first in his mind were students and the world of poetry. As a director, he was supportive of colleagues and a strong resource for students. Many have and will speak of his generosity, his joy of work, and his extraordinary energy. Nowhere was that more evident than in the summer program, an intense week of workshops, craft talks, evening readings, and softball games. His attention to detail, another strength, was clear. He was decisive on how he wanted the campus environment to be for the faculty and the student. His gift was setting the example, whether teaching, listening to student readings, having lunch and dinner with colleagues and students, planning his annual softball game. Tom was always present with everyone. Tom's impact on the writing program has been significant. Even after leaving for Georgia Tech, he returned every summer and during the year for craft talks and readings. And as he said often during the past few years, when he retired from Georgia Tech, he was coming back here to teach. But he's left a legacy. So many of his former students, who really became teachers because of working with him, are here today and will be carrying that legacy forward.
Called Refrigerator 1957. I'm thinking of those giant old refrigerators that used to exist in the 1950s, and I'm thinking of the one in my own childhood home, and it centers around one thing that was in this refrigerator 1957. More like a vault. You pull the handle out, and on the shelves, not a lot. And what there is, a boiled potato in a bag, a chicken carcass under foil, looking dispirited, drained, mugged. This is not a place to go in hunger or hope. But just to the right of the middle door shelf, a lit from within red, heart red, sexual red, wet neon red, shining red in their liquid, exotic, aloof, slumming in such company, a jar of maraschino cherries. 3/4 full, fiery globes like strippers at a church social. Maraschino cherries, maraschino, the only foreign word I knew. Not once did I see these cherries employed, not in a drink nor on top of a glob of ice cream or just pop one in your mouth, not once. The same jar there through an entire childhood of dull dinners. Bald meat, pocked peas, and, see above, boiled potatoes. Maybe they came over from the old country, family heirlooms, or were status symbols bought with a piece of the first paycheck from a sweatshop, which beat the pig farm in Bohemia, handed down from my grandparents to my parents to be someday mine, then my child's. They were beautiful. And if I never ate one, it was because I knew they might be missed, or because I knew it would not be replaced, and because you do not eat that which rips your heart with joy. They were very colorful things, maraschino cherries. I asked my mother years later what they were there for, and she said she would put a half of one on my grandmother's grapefruit, which she had about once a month, so that's why they lasted so long. I tell people you don't get a lot of money from poetry. I don't recommend it as a career path if you want to make a lot of money. But I got about 10 jars of maraschino cherries after that poem was published, and one of them must have been from a restaurant or something, because it was about this big, 1,000 or more maraschino cherries. But I was just moving at the time, and I couldn't. How do you carry a giant jar of maraschino cherries from New York to Atlanta? So I left them in the refrigerator of the apartment I was renting. I always hoped that whoever opened that up and saw them was struck by the color the same way I was.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marie Howe. And, well, where's Vijay? Where are you, Vijay? Where are you? The first time I saw Tom, I was at Columbia, and Vijay was there too. And he gave a reading with a bunch of other people at a church, and he read the elegy for Frank Stamford. And I'd never seen anybody talk like that. I'd never seen anybody say a poem like that. So clear, so alive, so direct. You dumb fucker, Frank. He said that. And I thought, you can say that in a poem? You dumb fucker, Frank. And then we all said, do you think he's gay? Because he was wearing an earring, 1980. That was, unusual. I was like, nah. We all had a crush on him. You dumb fucker, Frank. It was such a relief, you know what I'm saying? That someone would talk like that in a poem. Tom loved clarity and directness. As complicated as his poems were linguistically, he hated what he called doily making, right? I mean, he hated that stuff. He loved clarity. And his lines, his voice, which is like no one else's, is so embedded in the poems that you can't help but sound like him when you read his poems, if you follow the instructions. So I was going to read a longer poem, but I know we're running over, so I won't. I want to just remember some people who cannot be here. Tom came to Sarah Lawrence when he was a young, wild boy. And he met Jean Valentine, Grace Paley, and Jane Cooper. And I think those women had quite a lot to do with making him into the man he was. I really do. Those three women, amazing women. I also want to remember Stuart Deschelle, who can't be here today because his flight got canceled. I met Tom at Stuart Deschelle's apartment in 1982. And also Robert Fanning, who was a student of his and loves Tom. And he told me a great story about Tom. Really quickly, the last time he was working on Bill Knott's book with Tom, and Robert dropped him off at his hotel, and they said goodbye. Robert turned back to his car, and Tom turned back from the hotel and said, Robert, wait a minute. And he came walking back across the parking lot to Robert and stood in front of him and said, you're a good man, you've got a great family, you've written 2 books and you're going to write more, you've got a great job, you're doing a beautiful job with your life. And then he hugged him and went back in. Tom hired me here. He hired me and we argued a lot. And I loved that. We were like brother and sister. He was also the first sober man I ever saw who was cool. I was a fellow at the work center. I was in love with an alcoholic. Tom came down to do one of those little gigs. He knew this person. He came walking in. He gave me instructions. And Jean Kilbourne and I met Jean and changed my life in many, many ways. But for me to see somebody who was like a former bad boy, turn into someone who was sober and thinking of others and trying to walk through the world without anything in his hands, that was really something to see. Tarantulas on the life buoy. For some semi-tropical reason, when the rains fall, relentlessly, they fall into swimming pools, those otherwise bright and scary arachnids. They can swim a little, but not for long, and they can't climb the ladder out. They usually drown. But if you want their favor, if you believe there is justice, a reward for not loving the death of ugly and even dangerous, the eel, hog, snake, rats, creatures, if you believe these things, then you would leave a life buoy or two in your swimming pool at night. And in the morning, you would haul ashore the huddled, hairy survivors and escort them back to the bush. And know, be assured that at least these saved as individuals would not turn up again someday in your hat, drawer, or the tangled underworld of your socks. And that even when your belief in justice merges with your belief in dreams, they may tell the others in a sign language 4 times as subtle and complicated as man's, that you are good, that you love them, that you would save them again.
I'm Jerry LaFemina. In the last email Tom wrote to me, he said, I should send a picture of you I keep at my desk. And I was stunned. Tom loved his students, and I'm super fortunate to have been one of them. And more, Tom taught me to be a teacher. And that's what I'm going to talk about. He used to say to me, I'm a teacher, it's what pays the bills. It's a belief that stayed with me all these years later through numerous teaching jobs. Tom's generosity, of course, is legion. Look around this room. The crowd here, it's a testament to his generosity. He once told me when he was keeping a budget that of his expenditures that he had a line item for bums. He knew I was a scholarship kid. He knew that I was hungry often and hungry for poetry. He would pay me because I had a crappy car to drive the visiting poets back to the city. And this is back when he was driving from Boston back and forth. He didn't want to drive to readings in the city, so he would pay me to drive him to readings. And once taking him to St. Anne's in Brooklyn as we were coming down the East Side Highway, south of Houston Street, and there was the Brooklyn Bridge. He started to recite Hart Crane from memory. How many dawns chill from his rippling rest, the seagull's wings shall dip and pivot him, shedding white rings of tumult, building high over the chained bay waters, liberty. Then with inviolate curve forsake our eyes, as apparitional as sails that cross some page of figures to be filed away, till elevators drop us from our day. It wasn't the first time I'd heard Tom read from memory. It was a skill. He loved poems, and he loved his students. It was the first time I'd actually heard Hart Crane, and years later in grad school, The Bridge was a major part of my master's thesis in modern poetry. I credit Tom for that. Those drives with him, they were foundational to my being the poet and teacher I am, even though there were only about 6 of them. They seem like there were so many more. I think there were only about 5 softball games. They feel like I feel like I played a full baseball season's worth. Those drives were key to my apprenticeship in what it means to be a poet and more, what it means to be a teacher. After Tom's passing, I was at the AWP conference. It was 3 days later, and I saw some of my former students. I took pictures with them. I printed them out. They sit on my desk at Frostburg State University. They remind me of Tom. They remind me of why I do this. I hope I am half the influence on them as he was on me. Godspeed, and thank you, Tom.
I'm Kevin Pilkington, and I'm a little pissed. I thought I was Tom's best friend. It's an entire room of you. But I was quite close with Tom. I've been teaching here since the early 90s, and we did a lot together here at school, in the city, and one memorable ride from Boston to New York. But I actually met Tom a few years before that, the mid to late 80s, and I was scrounging around, adjuncting, and I taught a poetry workshop at the New School. And I went to a book party for one of the poets there. And, this guy with long hair was sitting on the couch smoking, and someone said, "Hey, that's Tom Lux." And he looked different. I grew up nearby in Fleetwood, and I used to use the library here in grad school. I remember looking at Memory's Hand Grenade, but he looked like an 18-year-old kid on that cover, the back cover, if you've ever seen it. But he looked cool, So we talked and sort of hit it off, and I said to him, "Look, hey man, would you talk to my class at the New School?" And I figured he'd say, "No, he's too busy." He said, "Yeah, sure, I'll come down." I said, "Well, I can't get you much money." He said, "As long as if it pays my train fare, I'm happy." And that's what I got him, train fare. And so we did a few classes. He did a few classes, and I remember the first time he taught the class. I mean, he literally took it over, I remember thinking, well, man, that's how it's done. That's how you do it. So we stayed in touch, and we'd see each other, and he brought me up to Sarah Lawrence a couple of times to meet various students. Then he said to me, man, we have two spots coming up in the spring at Sarah Lawrence, and I want you to teach. I want to get you on the faculty. And I said to him, "Well, man, I only have a couple of poems published in various magazines." He said, "Yeah, but they're good magazines." And I said, "Well, I haven't taught that much." He goes, "Yeah, but I've heard you teach, and that's why I want you up at Sarah Lawrence." He said, "But the only snag is you don't have a book." And that was a problem. So he calls me back a little bit after that, and he says, "I have an idea. I'm gonna start a little chapbook press." And I was all ears, So he ended up publishing myself, Stuart Deschelle, who unfortunately is not here, who went on to become an award-winning poet, Lucy Greeley, who was his Dani, and you might know her from Autobiography of a Face, her memoir, which I recommend it highly if you haven't read it, and Eva Scronde, who's teaching now, I think, in Texas. And so he said, "Okay, man, now you have a book. So I'm going to set up an interview for you and go from there." So So I had the interview on a Friday, and I was sure I blew it. You know, I was so depressed. You know, Irishmen usually think the glass is half empty, and if it's half empty, we drink it. So there's no hope left. So I walked around sort of depressed, and I get a call, I think it was the Tuesday, on my voicemail. I'm checking my voicemail, and he says, "Kev, it's Tom." And he always said that. Every time I pick up the phone, he'd say, "Kev," it sounded like a chant, which I loved. I love the sound of his voice on the phone, by the way. So he said, "Great, man. Your interview was wonderful. They loved you. You are now part of the Sarah Lawrence writing faculty." And I'm like, yes, you know. And he waits for a couple of seconds of silence. Then he says, "You poor, underpaid fucker." So I've always thought teaching is a privilege, and I feel privileged to be teaching here for the past 20-some-odd years because of Tom. The other thing I remember about him, this is more personal stuff. Gene alluded to it before, that he desperately wanted to be a dad. He wanted a child, and he wanted a girl. And I remember, you know, he was thrilled when Claudia was born. And I remember I called him up one time, and I said, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm making Claudia's favorite lunch." And I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "Chicken soup without the soup." You don't eat that anymore, do you? No. Sounds delicious. And then he also made me her godfather, which I took seriously. And I bought her, the first thing I bought her as her godfather was, I'm sure all godfathers buy this, red plaid high top sneakers. I wanted her to be the coolest kid in Newton, Mass. And every time there was some kind of holiday, it was an excuse for me to send her something. And Tom would send me photos of Claudia in a robe I bought her, or a sweater, some weird sweater that she loved. And it sort of went on for some years. But what I was going to do was, I was going to read a poem, but Jean did a beautiful job with it, a little too, so I'm not going to read it. But I do want to say that you don't need me to tell you how remarkable a poet Tom is. He went in what Yeats called "in pursuit of a more passionate syntax." And you'll hear that over and over again in his poetry. And I believe his work will live on in the classical sense. We'll be reading his work in 100 years if we're still here, the planet. We will be. We'll stop there on that one. But I do believe that his greatest poem, his greatest creation, is his daughter Claudia. And I'm sure he would agree with me. And so I was going to follow it up with a little tooth, but I'll stop there. I just wanted to say that I said before, well, I should have, maybe I didn't say, but Tom is like a brother to me for a 10-year span. And I will continue to love him as a brother, as Dylan Thomas would say, for as long as forever is.
And so, and we are running a bit long, so each person, if I could please request, brevity is the soul of wit, is it not?
It's not my fault.
No?
Well, I'm going to keep this short, too. I promise. As we all know, this was not supposed to happen. And Tom is standing right here with one index finger in the air, and he's reciting Vallejo. And he's going agape. He's launching himself as teacher talking too much. with his terrible and beautiful passion for poetry, for teaching, Tom went beyond the precincts of safety. What I mean by that is he broke every rule that he could. And he did that for our sake. He changed our lives, as has been said. Can you see me now, right? I have a starched collar on, and my name is the Right Reverend Johnson. I was heading towards Yale Divinity when I was rudely interrupted by this crazed and annoyingly persistent person. Then the acceptance letter from Columbia arrived. I hadn't even finished my application. I suddenly thought, oh, gee whiz. I thought, I wonder who was teaching at Columbia that year. Oh, could it be Tom? Yeah, yeah. And it changed my life, of course. Behind our backs, Tom has arranged every ordeal that we must endure in order to remain as passionate about poetry and about teaching and reading as he is. Tom loved to read. He read a lot of biographies. He loved to read history. I was a little concerned once when he left a book in my office called The History. Yeah, it's true. It was called The History of New York City Rats. No, it is literally true. Well, it might have been subway rats, too. Tom loved his work passionately, seriously, but as I know for a fact, Tom loved Claudia and Jenny with all of his huge heart. He told me so. He said, I won't leave you because I can't. Regarding Travis and Katie, wherever you went, he didn't entirely endorse. He said, watch it, Travis. Katie was lovely. No, Travis, he really deeply cared, but how many of us are Tom's lackeys? Oh, hand raised, Tom's lackeys, he used to call it. Boom. But then, that's not probably something I'd put in the resume. From an ancient poem that I wrote, I'm just going to read the very last short stanza. The title was, I will write this letter for Tom. I end this letter as I began, in no shape to give or retrieve the words and with no right to be blessed or to bless, as I do now, nevertheless, as I bless you. Tom's imperative is that we illuminate the world. When I was unclear and had wallpapered most of my office with rejection letters, Tom said, you don't want the largest bird known to man to nest on your head. It is called the giant auk, and it will nest and then it will peck your brains out. Well, thanks, Tom. I feel much better now. There's another side to the light that Tom brought. to bring illumination to the world as individuals is the hardest work. And as Viktor Frankl said, this is necessity. In order to give life, we must be ready to burn. Tom.
Hello, I'm Elena Karina Byrne, formerly Elena Karina Jepson. Also, in case any of you wondered, I found out recently, first dummy. We were called Tom's freshman dummies, and I did not know we were the very first dummies afforded that name. And the interesting thing about that was that when we were told we were his dummies, we were told that we would keep that name until we graduated. Then, 3 books later, many awards later, I said something to Tom casually about, have I earned a different title? No, still dummy. And the same went for having 2 babies. I said something also casually about being an adult. Don't push it. And you're reminding me that not that you need to be reminded about Tom's love of baseball and softball, but I was reminded that I had the distinct honor of being his pitcher while I was at Sarah Lawrence. And we were written up in the New York Daily News, and they got the story a little bit wrong, but I think we actually won that game against Daniel Halpern in Columbia. So I had this timed for under 5 minutes, but I'm not going to read both poems. I originally had 2 poems that I wrote for Tom, and one of them, which is called Dummies We Are, is you can find it. It's forthcoming in Poetry International. I'm not going to read that one. It's a really old poem. But as a freshman dummy, always gladly a dummy, and poetry's fever fire, and I'm going to use a couple of his phrases. I guess I should do the quote thing. Plowed under all jewels, son of home, and dirt, bread, and foolishness, yes, and love, and to borrow some of his words from the poem, Almost Dancing. If you look in the Cortland Review, there's a wonderful long tribute to Tom from many poets. Please do look that up. And from his poem, Almost Dancing, love, he says, is his favorite abstraction. Language is great, slave and salve, in the waltz or in the making of this art, and also what Rilke called in his letters, to quote, the necessary irrepressible. And so I too say, stop yourself in mid-breath and go on, though in grief. We go on with and away from each other where there is hope and where we begin again and again, begin in Tom's name. And so this is a poem also forthcoming for Tom called Cow Song. He was my former professor, my mentor, my Don, my dearest friend, and also, as many people said, he was like a brother to me. For 39 years. I heard them far off, deep calling from behind death's invisible floor door. Their wallow metronome from the after rain mud was one giant body. Arizona's yellow arm length of light all the way to my own body standing at the edge of their field held me. I moved toward them and they toward me, as if to ask for something from nothing, as memory does, each face dumbfounded, dumb and found by the time frame of my own fear, surrounded at dusk. There was a plastic grocery bag, its ghost body cornered small against a tree, and there was a heavy smell, Desolation is equal to contained energy now. Their heavy bodies toward me, my own slow inside their circle without kolning. Kolning is a Swedish song for cows, not a pillowcase pulled over the head. Here, the mountains could be seen from far away. There's an abandoned physics, a floor door. My head call hurting me in hearing nothing but them. Bones for bones, female indicates the inside of the mouth when singing is grief alone and is curved. You can't stop shifting no matter how slow. It sounds like confusion in one direction. I wanted to tell you this in your absence. It sounds like the oak. It sounds like the oak of floorboards in God's head. For Thomas Lux. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Miles Kuhn. Tom Lux was my teacher, but he taught much more than just poetry. He taught generosity. He taught friendship. He taught acceptance of others. I loved him deeply and miss him terribly. He always said, serve the craft. And so, after I left Sarah Lawrence, bereft that I was no longer going to be here in these classrooms, I decided selfishly, I ought to start a poetry festival, and we're going to do it every year. And I called Tom and said, Tom, I'd like you to head my Poets Advisory Board. And he said, I'll do it, but what is it? I said, I don't know yet. There is no advisory board. So he got on the phone, solicited a few names, Billy Collins, Vijay Seshadri, Ellen Bryant Voigt, and we created an advisory board that gave us the gravitas to establish the first festival. And by the way, all the teachers were Sarah Lawrence people. Just coincidence. Anyway, 13 years later, Tom was at his last festival with us. And his spirit and his dedication to creating a safe place for the creation of poetry has stayed with me, and we are trying to emulate it every day that we stay doing our work. I wrote this poem at Sarah Lawrence and read it at an open mic reading. It's probably singularly inappropriate for this occasion, but I still remember Tom's face when I read the poem aloud, and I'm sharing with it you now. Here you go. It's called Rooms at the Inn. If all the doors blew open, letting the light from every room pour into this dark corridor, would I still have to feel my way, intimidated by thresholds? I want the beds undone, tiebacks to release the diaphanous curtains so they blow in the wind. Let sheets billow into sails, break the careful grip of hospital corners. I need a world where intent and act are one, and I speak to please no one but myself. Still, I use a different name in every room. In my love's, I am Neruda. In my father's, Plath. The gray-haired innkeeper doesn't mind as long as I pay the tab. He stares from underneath his visor, and in a voice that resonates with ancestral authority, says, I'll never feel at home, checking in as myself. Fuck you, I say, and sign the register. Thomas Lux.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Wallace, and I'm really sorry I can't be there with you all today. I worked with Tom for many years in the writing program and also with the Summer Writers Conference. And I just wanted to share a short story about that conference and also read a poem. So, you know, Tom's insistence on softball as part of the conference is legendary. I'm sure others have told stories about that today. Here's another one of those afternoons. I think they were probably Wednesday or Thursday afternoons we were playing, and one of the participants hit this amazing home run. I mean, up and over everybody's head and way past the boundaries of the field and kaboom right into the windows of Marshall Field, which is the music building right behind the baseball field. So shattering glass everywhere, big noise, the security fellows came down, and of course the first one to approach them was Tom, raises his hand, says, "I broke the windows, just tell me what I need to do." And, you know, just Tom, huge-hearted Tom. So he also inspired in me a love of baseball, and I wrote this poem after seeing one of many games that I go to watch at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, which are fun to watch because the field is real close and the players are close and you can hear all their various noises and they have nicknames for each other and it's really fun. So this poem is called Basho at the Plate for Thomas Lux. The catcher flings his mask back and jigs around the plate beneath the foul. On the next strike, Finnegan is out, and when Tony cocks back on the mound, the crowd chants, "Moose, Moose," hoping he'll clock it. In the frame made by the catcher's butt and the umpire's knee, an April pear tree blooms, white against the green, green field. And then, after the back cracks, gone. We love you, Tom.
Stand up and pull out this insert from your program. Everybody stand up. What is the insert? Take me out to the ballgame, right? Yes. So Jennifer Wallace, in one of the summer Santa seminars, read that poem, pulled out her ukulele, and we sang. So we're going to do that again now in Jennifer's honor and in Tom's honor. And Robert's coming. Did everyone?
Hello, I'm Jeffrey McDaniel. Alexandra, thank you for putting this together. A lot of work. I came to this school in 1986, played sports, was also kind of a delinquent, and had a chip on my shoulder. Knew I wanted to study poetry, and people were like, that's the guy to talk to, Tom Lux. So, as you know, at Sarah Lawrence, it's a very intimate way that you meet your teachers. You have to go have interviews with them. And I went to one, and someone else was there, so I didn't really talk at all, and because I was too cool to talk in front of somebody else. And then, so I came back and I saw Tom by myself. And, all I could say was I want to study poetry. I had been writing a lot in high school, bad rhyming poems, sort of some bad mix of Shakespeare and rap. Kind of like the worst possible Hamilton. And you know, what was I going to say to him? He is like, you know, tell me about yourself. Because it's not like as a 19-year-old, I'm going to really go into my whole, you know, approach to poetry and my aesthetics or something like that. And next thing I know, we're talking about my family, and he's talking to me like a person, and I'm leaving his office crying my eyes out because he's diagnosed my mother as an alcoholic and me as, you know, adult child of an alcoholic. And that was a very intense thing. And it was amazing to be in his workshop after that. Pomone Triplett was in there, Joel Brower, myself, Paul Newman's daughter, a woman named Tamar Yazaloff. I mean, 4 of us have books now. It was amazing to be in there. He did really piss me off one day. I wrote a poem about like tears or crying, and it was like all these, I think I had 8 lines about like the like cubes of pain rolling down my face and being lugged down. And in front of the whole class, he's just like, he cried. That's all you need to say, he cried. And I was so pissed. I wanted to punch him so bad. But, you know, he told the truth. He told the truth. I was very fortunate at that time. He was living in Boston. Somehow he would take me out to Japan Inn. He'd take me out to eat a lot. He just sort of adopted me. And, you know, he talked to me a lot about my drinking, and he had this way of giving me space to sort of talk about what I was going through. He took me to an AA meeting back in 86, 87, and saying there is a cure, but he didn't force it on me. So there was this way that he created a space, and that meant all the difference in the world, because I knew there was a place for me one day. I knew there was a place that I could go. And when I was here, I was lost. I mean, we're talking, I was smoking crack outside of Barbara Kaplan's office on a balcony from a Coke can. And I mean, you know, I'm just kidding about that. I never did that. I'm a professor here. I never did that. I was just using that hyperbole for dramatic effect. But, you know, and so he carried that message to me, though, and made, you know, and then he brought me back here to teach. Brought me back here to read a few times. He brought me back here to teach in 2001. And Claudia came to my office. It was the exact same office, this horrible office by Marshall Field. You know, and it was like, he said Lucy Greeley's stuff was up there in this like closet. And then Claudia started to cry during our interview, but for different reasons. I wish I could say it was because I was so soulful with her and diagnosed something, but it was just because she thought it was a fiction class and not poetry, and she was running out of time. But still, there was like a nice symmetry to it. And then, you know, so I've been here for 16 years, and Tom, for the past few years, we started the summer seminar again because it had lapsed, and Tom was up here teaching, and we were here. Those softball pictures were, you know, 2 summers ago, where he's just physical, loved playing baseball, loved if you could go yard. I mean, he was just fanatical about that kind of stuff, and so strong and strong-hearted. You know, I owe my life to this man. I can't, and that's not hyperbole. I owe everything to him. I am so grateful and lucky to have had him in my life. And I think one of the things that we can walk away from here and think about is he's been so generous to us. Now it's our job to be generous to his work and try to carry his work into the world. Because he's not here anymore for his work. You know, he can't read his poems. That's a great video of him reading it, but it's our time now to show our love for his work, because behind the great teacher is also a great poet. He's a real, true poet. I'm going to read 2 short poems of his here. One he would hate me reading. It's from one of his early books, The Glassblower's Breath, Madrigal on the Way Home. The willow turns its back coolly in the wind as I try to embrace it. Time to go home. And since I'm going towards you, I want to know who owns the sublime. If I arrive with this knowledge, will you welcome me into your cathedral? I adore your nape, and would you drape yourself? If we could only agree on one place of exile, an unprecarious ledge, a not-so-cold cliff where the rain sighs. Here's a little riddle I can always solve. what's better, your tongue or the night's? Ha! I want to lie down beside the length of you, simply because your earlobe is the gentlest small animal on earth. Love that last line. And I was just going to read that poem. That's a poem of his that's not collected anywhere. It's a great poem. He kind of seemed to have mixed feelings about his first couple of books when he was more in the sort of James Tate, Charles Simic, Bill Knott's surrealist realm, and he kind of moved a little bit away from that. His great story about James Tate apparently got Tom's dad stoned once, which was pretty cool. But this poem talked about the milkman and his son, and thinking of sports and fathers. For a year, he'd collect the milk bottles, those cracked, chipped, or with the labels blue scene of a farm fading. In winter, they'd load the boxes on a sled and drag them to the dump, which was lovely then, a white sheet drawn up like a joke over the face of a sleeper. As they lob the bottles in, the son begs a trick, and the milkman obliges, tossing one bottle in a high arc. He shatters it in midair with another. 1,000 astonished splints of glass falling again and again, and damned if that milkman, that easy slinger on the dump's edge, as the drifted junk tips its hat of snow, damned if he didn't hit almost half. Not bad, along with gentleness and the sane bewilderment of understanding nothing cruel. It was a thing he did best.
I was going to do my Stuart Deschelles impersonation, see if anybody knew. Anybody would notice. These Lorans, maybe, or somebody? Somebody left glasses here. Okay. So Marie said earlier, she referenced Elegy for Frank Stanford, and I was going to read it, but then I thought, well, everybody seems to know it, so I'm not going to read it. But I can tell you a story about it. All right. This is the poem that is largely responsible for me coming to Sarah Lawrence as a grad student. Elegy for Frank Stanford, 1949 to 1978. A message from a secretary tells me first, the heavy clock you were in your mother's lap has stopped. Later, I learned who stopped it. You, with 3 lead thuds, determined insults to your heart. You dumb fucker, Frank. I assumed that night the seminarians were mostly on their knees, and on their dinner plates, only a few wing bones, quiet flutes ahead of the wind. I can almost understand, Frank, your nerves, odometer needle waving in danger, your whole body, in fact, ping-raked, a rainbow disassembling. You woke in the dark, dreaming a necklace of bloodsuckers, but that final gesture, Frank, irreversible cliche. The long doorman of the East continues his daily job, bending slightly at the waist to wave dawn past. Then the sparrows begin their standard tunes every day, Frank, every day. There's the good hammer music in the poles of north and south. There's the important rasp of snake over desert and rock. There's agriculture, even when it fails, needle-sized carrots, blue pumpkins, and precedencies like yours, Frank, of dredging companies, but precedencies. You must have been desiring exit badly, so now you're a bit of gold to pound back into the earth, the dew, of course, forever lapping at your toes. Frank, you dumb fucker, who loves you regardless. So I had an uncle. I had an uncle about 10 years into my friendship with Tom, and his name was Frank, and he died by suicide. And I drove to Michigan, and I thought it would be a great idea to read that poem at his funeral. And fuck it, I did, you know? And these women came up to me afterwards, they were weeping, and they were saying, "You're the poet from New York, the nephew, right? Oh, God." And I said, no, as I explained, that was by my mentor, and this is the title of the poem if you want to look it up. And I came back and I told Tom this story, and I said, if you see a big spike in book sales in Michigan, let me know. And he gave me that look, he would give you that look, and he would pause for a minute, and he said, "Ronnie, you drove all the way to Michigan to read one of my old poems at a funeral?" And I said, "Yeah." And women were crying? I said, "Yeah." And he paused again, and he said, "Did it at least get you laid?" That's a true story. So I'm going to do a very short one, and then I couldn't think of a better poem to leave with, because Tom was never without a moment to suggest a better poem. Someone had written the poem we were trying to write, but somebody had done it better. And he was. This poem is in the tradition of the way that poets write about other poems, and it just seemed strangely appropriate, so I just want to share it. Here's to Samuel Greenberg. Here's to Samuel Greenberg, who died of bum lungs, age 23, in 1916, penniless, leaving only a few notebooks as a gift to Hart Crane, who died of bum lungs, i.e. filled with seawater, age 33, in 1932. Here's to you, Samuel, semi-illiterate, coughing it out among total illiterates, during the only time in your life you had time to write, on your back, on a cot, on Ward Island, preparing nearly inaudible gifts of language which were used as collaboration in a few lines and a few poems by Hart Crane, who had a little more time to sing through his mouth. Here's to you, Samuel Greenberg, small master. Here's to your bones which glow and are sliding beneath the earth with the earth. We love you, Tom.
Hi, everybody. We're going to be quick. We're just going to read Triptych Middle Panel Burning. Just playing. We're not reading that last poem. Very good. I'm Pat Rosal.
I'm Ross Gay.
Ode to the Unbroken World, which is coming.
It must be coming, mustn't it?
Churches and saloons are filled with decent humans.
A mother wants to feed her daughter, fathers to buy their children things that break.
People laugh all over the world. People laugh.
We were born to laugh, and we know how to be sad.
We dislike injustice
and cancer
and are not unaware of our terrible errors.
A man wants to love his wife.
His wife wants him to carry some.
We're capable of empathy and intense moments of joy.
Sure, some of us are venal, but not most.
There's always a punch bowl somewhere in which floats a...
Life's a bullet that fast, and the sweeter for it.
It's the same everywhere.
Slovenia,
India,
Pakistan,
Suriname.
People like to pray.
Or they don't.
Or they like to fill
a blue plastic pool
in the backyard with a hose.
And watch their children splash.
Or sit in cafes.
Or at a table with family.
And if a long train of cattle cars passes along West Ridge,
it's only the cattle from East Ridge going to the abattoir.
The unbroken world is coming.
It must be coming.
I heard a choir.
There were clouds.
There was dust.
I heard it in the streets.
I heard it.
Announced by loud hailers.
Mounted
on trucks.
You want to say something? Ross was here a year before me, and I got waitlisted. I applied in 1997, so exactly 20 years ago, I got let into. Tom let me into Sarah Lawrence, and the way I got in was he invited me up to go sit down in his craft class, second floor, Sloanham. I sat next to this dude. I didn't know there was going to be a year of good basketball that year. So But yeah, it was the beginning of a lot of friendships, including Curtis Bauer, and me and Ross are friends. And I want to say too, you know,
Could you say just how you got let in? Because
Well,
that's part of his generosity.
yeah, I mean, like I was waitlisted. I mean, I didn't read shit by the time I came here, but Tom must have seen something. I came, sat in on his class for that 3 hours or whatever it was, and then he made me follow his ass all the way from Sloan up over that little wall. I'm like, where is this white dude taking me? And then I was like, and then I said, you know, I was like, I'm on the wait list. Do I have a chance? He says, you're in. I'm telling you that you're in. Get the fuck out of here. I ran out of there. Happy. But the thing I was gonna say was that I am almost Tom's age when I first met him, and I'm going to take over. I'm gonna be directing the MFA program at Rutgers, and so I feel like I think about him all the time, and I'm gonna do my best to take what I can for it.
And yeah, I just wanted to say, like, when Jeff was talking, other people were talking, this sort of like a pedagogy of care and a pedagogy of generosity. And that's one of the things that he modeled. And his work carries that. And it's beautiful also that we in our bodies sort of carry that spirit forward. There was this, when I told my mother that Tom died, she said, oh, you know, she was sad. And she said, remember that letter he wrote us? I was like, remind me? I wasn't an easy child, and it was clear that Tom had somehow inferred this. I didn't talk about that explicitly. And he had actually written, after I graduated, written my folks a letter saying, hey, you guys did a good job. Incredible. Like, that's a pedagogy of generosity. That's actually kind of breaking a rule. That's breaking a rule. And anyway, what a lovely, generous, big heart that we get to sort of continue to carry forth. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Holly Lux. I had the privilege for loving and being loved by Tom in the last act of his life. But the person I was privileged to know, he was created by all of you who loved him in various acts, some before I was born. But thank you. You did a great job. He had some successes, he had some mistakes he made, but they all made him a better person, believe me. In the end of his life, he became his true self. I'm really pleased to be here, especially today, with Tom's and Jean's daughter, Claudia. If you have a new term for, instead of stepdaughter, I mean, I have a wonderful stepmom here, and it's appropriate for us, but our age difference isn't quite, so I'm kind of the step Jenny right now, but I've also called her like my sister with whom I do not argue. But if you have a new term, we're open to that. And of course, to be here with Jean as well, who was with Tom for many years, and he screwed up that one. He would have said so himself, but you and I are a lot alike, and he finally had the brains to be with somebody he was supposed to be with, somebody like us. Type A a little bit, maybe, a little bit. But thank you for making him the man he was, both of you ladies. And I have one factual correction. Where's Travis? Travis was so sweet to say, Tom, every day he came into work, he hit that Homer Simpson button. I just need to make it clear that when Tom went to Georgia Tech, he had a Monday-Tuesday schedule. So, you know, and I was his chauffeur, so I'd pick him up on Monday evening and say, happy hump day. He was very smart. He didn't know the art of negotiation, but somehow when Georgia Tech, and they are very military style, they said, do you want, in your new position here, would you like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule or a Tuesday, Thursday schedule? And he said, Monday, Tuesday, please. And somehow he got that. And one other thing, I wrote some comments, but before I get into that, I wanted to say one thing. They say before the end of your life, it all flashes before you. And Claudia and I had a heck of a lot of hope when she came out to help me care for him. We hoped, we tried, we did everything we could to save that man's life, the two of us. We were tough, girl. We were tough. But then one day I was with him, and he woke up in the morning and he said, I had the most miraculous dream. I had a dream that I was on 2 campuses, on Georgia Tech and on Sarah Lawrence. And it was a beautiful moment, but I knew then that he was at the end. He had seen what really mattered to him, his 2 homes. So now a few of my prepared words. And I already spoke, we had a beautiful event at Georgia Tech, and I kind of let it all go then, all my personal stuff. But I'm going to share a few vignettes, domestic and, if you'll believe it, religious. So, with Tom, learning to tell the difference between fact and fiction, between trick, metaphor, and fancy was an art form. He told me of many oddities: the man who intentionally swallowed scissors, the one type of monkey that can swim, a thing called marine snow, and, as Marie mentioned earlier, the tarantulas that, when washed by heavy rains into swimming pools, would climb to life buoys for safety. Of course, weird details surface in many of Tom's poems. If I had the nerve to doubt the truth of something he told me, he would say in his most fake, pompous voice, if you were familiar with my oeuvre. But then he could be, as he said, plain old mischievous. Being married to Tom, I felt obliged to cultivate at least some appreciation for baseball, especially if I wanted to spend time with him, say, from March through October. Let it be known, and my family is here, they can attest to this, but let it be known that when I played softball in high school PE, I put my gym clothes on over my pantyhose. So secure was I in my belief that there would be no running, no sweating, no bathing necessary, because I always positioned myself in the outfield. One time, in yet another seemingly interminable Red Sox-Yankees game, someone kept hitting foul ball after foul ball. Bored almost to tears, I said, doesn't the umpire ever just say enough's enough? Oh yeah, Tom said, at 7. Fast forward to another game, maybe a year later. The guy at bat kept hitting fouls. Foul number 4, foul number 5. Wow, almost 7, I said. Oh yeah, one more and he's out, Tom said. Fidgeting, starting to sweat a little. Foul number 7, no out. I gave Tom the side eye. He broke into uncontrollable laughter, his body shaking. Why would you tell me that? I exclaimed. I wanted to see how far it could go. How could you, I said. How could you trick your sweet little wife who has demonstrated a serious interest in baseball just to please you? I punched him in the arm a few times, but how could I be mad? Really? Seeing Tom, a man prone to the black dog, laughing uncontrollably, losing it, was intoxicating. Knowing Tom's delight in duping me from time to time, you can understand my doubt then when he told me, this is the religious part, when he told me he had served many years as an altar boy. Jean, is this true? Yes, okay. After all, this was the man who, once I mentioned Advent, asked, is that the time before Easter? I did believe the story in which he got drunk on communion wine, but you don't need to be an altar boy to get into that kind of trouble. In the end, though, I believed him. I too grew up in a quiet New England town, just 30 miles away from his hometown. Options for a boy, Boy Scouts, tobacco picker, paper boy, altar boy. Tom told me that an aptitude test he had taken in high school had suggested suitable jobs. One vocation? Minister. Tom very well might have been one of those kids who fill in multiple choice bubbles in the shape of a smiley face. Regardless, I thought that having Tom join me 1 year at a Christmas Eve service might bring back some warm memories of youth, even though I knew he was not a believer in the traditional sense. The denomination, Episcopalian, same as the church in which Tom was raised and in which he had been, so he claimed, an altar boy. Somewhat surprisingly, he said he'd go with me. He dressed up, suit and tie, no jeans. My hopes were high. He sat at my right side, quietly respectful, looking even a little smaller than his normal self. He spoke when the congregation spoke, but did not sing. That was acceptable. During the prayers of the people, the rector led the congregation in a long list of prayers for the peace of the world, for the leaders of the nation, for the aged and infirm, for the poor and oppressed. And then came the prayer during which an even deeper silence falls in the church, for all who have died in the hope of the resurrection and for all the departed. As those around us were thinking of their dear grannies, Tom blurted out, "And what about the monkeys?" I pressed my knuckles hard into his thigh and gave him a look. Did this make things better? He said again, plenty loud. "But you can't forget the monkeys. The monkeys need our prayers too." I was truly mortified. However, glancing about apologetically, what did I see? No glares, just warm, generous smiles, kind eyes. I immediately understood. They did not think Tom was my husband, but rather my charge. And I had taken the care to bring him to church. And I had taken care, such care, in dressing him, suit, combed hair, and all. Needless to say, I did not encourage Tom to join me again at church. However, it may surprise you to know this. Here's our domestic segment. Every night we sat down to dinner in the privacy of our own home. We held hands and said grace. You might be thinking, oh, that's Tom, just trying to make his wife happy, or that's Tom not wanting to bite the hand that feeds him. We took turns each night. Mine was usually the same, giving thanks for food, family, friends, and each other. He would sometimes begin with an exaggerated, "Thank you, Jesus." Then he would give thanks for the same things I did, but he always added at the end, without fail, "Let us always keep in mind the needs of others." If I limited my own grace to giving thanks alone, he tacked on, head bowed even, "Let us always keep in mind the needs of others." I tell you truly, there was no sarcasm when he said this. What did Tom believe in? Giving. He did not need grace to remind him of this. For him, it came naturally. There was not a miserly bone in his body. The days came, not so long ago, October, November, December, when we had fewer occasions at the table, fewer occasions to say grace. I brought his dinners to him on a tray. He fought it. "I don't want you to be my nurse," he'd say. "You're my wife." I told him there was no choice. Of the food on the tray, he ate little. The days came not so long ago when he could not even eat a little. On these days I cried, begged him to eat something. Told him, "You know what happens when a person doesn't eat." I thought I could scare him out of dying. "I can't, baby. I just can't." I kept note of his caloric intake: saltine, 20 calories, ginger ale, 90, pudding, 120. I aimed to fill him with 1,500 calories, then later 1,200, 1,800, 200, always knowing that pushing him too far would upset his stomach, take us back to 0. I would have given anything for him to request something to eat, which would have been a sign that his body wanted to get stronger, wanted to make it. Imagine my confusion and then delight when Tom woke me out of sleep one night at 3 a.m., crying out one word, "Biscuit." It took me a minute to shake off the sleep. "What's that, honey?" "Biscuit," he said with urgency. I hustled out of bed, ran downstairs to the pantry, and came back up to the bedroom with a box of Nilla wafers. I helped Tom sit up at the edge of the bed. He took a nibble of the cookie, swallowed. The second tiny bite got caught in his throat. He coughed it up. I gave him a sip of ginger ale. He handed me back the cookie, still almost whole, and made a motion to go back to bed. How strange, I thought. What a whole lot of effort for one nibble of a Nilla wafer. Even stranger, not ever, not once, had Tom asked for a biscuit. I told Claudia the next morning about Tom's odd request. She said that very morning, when they were alone, he had told her that he had had a vivid dream. He had been on a train. He was with others, many others, starving others, being transported by the Nazis. I realized that the biscuit must have been an element of that dream, something he called out for in hunger, in part reality, in part of his dream. I then told Claudia the rest of the story. What happened after Tom had eaten his meager bite and got back under the covers? He called out in the darkness, "Chair!" I pointed across the room. "You want to sit in the chair?" "No," he said, frustrated. "Cher! The singer Cher?" I asked. "No." He was getting even more frustrated at his inability to communicate. He made a gesture from himself to me, then pointed at the partially eaten cookie. "Cher," he said. "Oh," I said, "Cher, thank you, honey." Only when he knew that I had accepted what he had given me did he fall back on his pillow and drift into sleep. Sometimes in our dreams we become other people, sometimes our worst selves. I hated that Tom dreamed of the Nazis. In another dream some days earlier, the Nazis were coming after me and Claudia. In this most recent dream, they had him. I imagine him in the dream, in the gray light of a train, foul and close air, starving, crying people crammed together. Somehow, a biscuit materializes. Out of someone's pocket, perhaps? Something found on the floor? A nibble for him, enough. More important, most important, in the dream, in life, to share. Thank you.
Well, I can't really follow that. My name is Chard Denord, and as I've been listening to everyone over the last hour and a half or whatever it's been, I've just wondered, how can someone, one human being, be so funny, so genuine, so irreverent, so generous, so crazy, so sane, so honest, so loving, so human, and so joyous at the same time. I'm in awe, and I think that as we hear these testimonies to Tom, we realize that we were in the presence of a truly extraordinary person who will live on in our memories, of course, but as Tom might say, he was a twofer. He was a genuine, memorable, dear person, a unique person, but he was also a great poet and we have the blessing of his poetry that will last, I'm sure, forever, as Tom, yes, did say, as long as forever is. These words just suddenly came to me also as I was listening. These words came suddenly to everyone. The words that span 5,000 years that go back to Gilgamesh. All that is left to one who grieves is convalescence, no change of heart or spiritual conversion, for the heart has changed and the spirit has converted to a thing that sees how much it costs to lose a friend it loved. I'm going to read a few memories and thoughts about Tom, and then end with one of his short poems from his latest book, To the Left of Time. Suddenly, there at my classroom window at the Putney School, one warm day in the spring of 1993, Tom. Instead of walking into the building to find my class, Tom had walked around the library building until he spied me from the outside, whereupon he raised the large, unlocked window and climbed into my classroom, almost tripping onto the floor as he jumped off the sill. My students, sophomores, sat stunned as he greeted them and then joined me at the blackboard. "Students," I said, "please welcome Thomas Lux, poet extraordinaire," at which they all said, "Hello, Thomas Lux." Tom replied, "Hello, Charts class," and then proceeded for the next hour to read them an exhilarating word-by-word analysis of Theodore Retke's poems, My Papa's Waltz. "Poets come in through the window," I told my class the next day. "Remember that." "He was great," one of my students said. "Yeah, he was really great," another said. "Can he come back?" Tom knew how brutally uncertain the life of the poet is in America, where thousands of poets vie for one brief moment in the spotlight. His gratitude for his fame as one of his generation's best poets lives side by side with his doubts about his worthiness as an eminent poet, a trait that wedded his humility to his humor, despite the fact that he occasionally liked to refer to himself as Gandhi. His generosity was legendary. He gave away large sums of money on the spot to the needy, sometimes almost all of it, wrote blurbs for practically anyone who asked, believing they might in fact become strong poets one day, which they in fact did. Visited his ailing elderly parents almost monthly in Massachusetts, even after he had moved to Atlanta. Invited dozens of poets to read and teach at Georgia Tech, loved his family and friends with abiding, deep affection, and honored his friends, especially those he felt he had fallen undeservedly by the wayside, like Bill Knott, whose poems he admired immensely and spent the last 6 months of his life editing and writing an introduction for in what he called the most important work of my life. We were standing in a circular garden at the Copper Beach Inn in Essex, Connecticut. It was a beautiful summer day in July, and the flowers were in bloom. About 50 family members and friends had gathered to celebrate Tom and Jenny's wedding, and were standing at the center of the garden listening intently. I was reading the famous passage about love from the New Testament that Jenny had selected for the ceremony, 1 Corinthians 13. As I neared the end of the passage, which reads, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways." Tom leaned over and whispered into my ear, just loud enough for most to hear, "Like hell, I will." Jenny blushed, then smiled. I did my best to read the rest of the passage. My memories of Tom are charged with the same current that his presence transmitted, which only exasperates my grief. He was both king and court jester, walking the fine line between the two with perfect balance. Stanley Kunitz famously described him as sui generis, his own kind of poet, unlike any of the fashions of his time, end of quote. I think of Walter Pater's words also as I recall my walks with Tom through Uruapan in Mexico. He used to like to say Europan when we were walking there. Pátzcuaro, Atlanta, Putney, Waltham, New York, Bronxville, Newton. He burned as a hard, gem-like flame, maintaining his ecstasy. His fire tormented him as much as it enlightened him, but somehow he held on to his belief in life's goodness. I remember in one of my classes, a student at Providence College, a very religious place, asked him what his thoughts were on death. And without hardly pausing, he turned to the student, he said, "It's a part of life," and ended it there, his explanation. I like to think now that Tom is gazing down on the world now, from high atop Mount Tom, that imposing escarpment that loomed over his boyhood home in East Hampton, Mass. That he floats up there like a shifting cloud every day with omniscient vision, and that silent voice he heard when writing poems and paid tribute to in his poem, The Voice You Hear When You Read Silently. That the thunder pounding up there on summer days is Tom, with his new shotgun, blasting away at the universe. And that the rain is his pellets falling on us as lead turned to water, from which we drink and are whole again. How else can one think following the loss of such a dear friend? Such thinking makes no less sense than a friend's sudden departure from this world. But it does live differently in our hearts as more of a believable dream than the darkness in which so many black dogs roam. Poetry exists, he said, because there is no other way to say the things that get said in good poems, except in poems. There is something about the right combination of metaphor or image connected to the business of being alive that only poems can do. To me, it makes me feel more alive, reading good poetry. End of quote. I'm going to finish with just a short poem that he wrote. As I mentioned, this is The Milking Stool. The milking stool on which my uncle sat was painted black. He'd call to us, "Come close, come closer, children. She won't hurt you." And we did. And he took an udder and pulled it down and angled it up to shoot each child, smallest to tallest, right between the eyes, with a gush of warm milk. It was a skill the cow didn't seem to mind. Come closer, children, close. 4 or 5 of us in a row, right between the eyes. Thank you, Tom, for making us feel more alive. Thank you for your life. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your poetry. And thank you for hitting us right between the eyes. Thank you.
So we're going to end the evening now with Tom speaking to us directly from the screen. But very quickly, I want to say thank you to everybody who spoke. Thank you for being here together. Thank you, Brian, for asking me to create this evening so that I could selfishly and cathartically move through my own grief. And Morgan for doing the video. Thank you. And let's just hear Tom.
Change is good. There's a whole new generation of younger poets and younger poetry teachers, and that's a good thing. That's a necessary thing. I've just met so many people here and known so many people here that it's just been a privilege. I mean, I tell my students here and everywhere I've taught that I hope you have the blessings in your life that I have, i.e. I get to talk about this thing I love to a captive audience, and I get paid for it. It's just an incredible blessing in life. And again, I'll keep saying, it was my privilege. I loved reading as a kid. I had no idea that there was any such thing as living poets. But I do remember thinking, even before I knew that it was possible to be a writer, or such things as writers really were still alive, I would see something and think, how would I write that as a sentence? I liked the way certain people played with language. I remember a little kid saying, looking at a helicopter and calling it a hegalopter. Just things like that about language. I still remember a 7th grade English teacher saying what onomatopoeia was, and he went, as an example, he went, puke! And of course, with a class of 7th graders, that got a huge laugh. But I had no idea that one could be a writer until I got to college. And it was just very gradual. I fell in love with poetry. I had a good teacher as an undergraduate. I just started doing it.
That's important too, that we have good poems, good novels, good short stories, good plays, good literature is immensely important to our civilization, to our culture. There wouldn't be any civilization without literature. So it's immensely important that it get done and that good literature be written. And my feeling always has been, why shouldn't it be us? If it needs to be done, why shouldn't we have a shot at doing it? It is important. I remember resisting it, particularly as a very young poet, because I was a surrealist, and all I cared about was imagination and some kind of crazy passion. And that's okay, but that's not enough. If we put pressure on imagination or passion, craziness, whatever, we don't love poetry for its order, we love it for its crazy heart. But when we put that kind of pressure of our craft on our crazy hearts, that's when things happen. That's when things really start cooking.
So I've been on this campus for about 35 or something, since 1975. And I got to tell you, I love this place. This is an extraordinary college. I was privileged to be here for so long. My daughter went to school here. She loved it. She just came back last spring for her 5th year anniversary. I've been to a million other campuses, but there is no other school on the planet like Sarah Lawrence. So I was privileged to have been a faculty member here for a very long time, and you're privileged to be students here. I bet you get it. I bet you understand. It's not, once you're here, it's pretty clear how different and how special this place is. So I'm delighted to be back.
I once heard that she really stood up for me here in my early days when I was so nuts, and I probably would have been fired, but I think Grace said, if you fire him, I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And so I probably owe my last 30 years of a living to her as well. Now, the title of this poem I got from Chard's grandson. Chard told me this, something that his grandson had said. He was about 8 years old at the time, Chard. Now, I don't think he came up with it himself. I don't know where he got it, at school or the internet maybe. But he said to Chard, every time someone masturbates, God kills a kitten. And that's the title of the poem.
I don't believe in inspiration. I believe in work. You got to feel something intensely, but after that, it's work. Pleasurable work, pleasurable labor, but labor.
What are those marks? Question mark and an exclamation point. Somebody mentioned the semicolon. Kate, don't use them. The best description of a semicolon I ever heard by Bill Knott was that semicolon is a period that leaks. And if you think of it that way when you're writing sentences, it'll really help.
When she was a student here, I get a call from her. She's on the subway in New York City. This would have been about 2008 or 7 maybe. And she said, Daddy, Dad, she's on the subway. Daddy, that poem you wrote about me is on the subway. You know, on the subway in New York, they have those poems up there right next to Dr. Z, the skin doctor, and then next to him is an orthodontist or something. And then they have these little poems.
up there. I used to see them all the time, and I think that'd be cool to have a poem on the subway someday. Until I noticed that every poet was dead. Then I said, no, that's okay. But they didn't tell me. It's done by the Poetry Society and somebody else, but they didn't bother telling me that they were going to do this. So she saw this poem. They have to be short. They have to be short to fit up there in that rack. So it's only 9 lines. A little tooth. Your baby grows a tooth, then 2 and 4 and 5, then she wants some meat directly from the bone. It's all over. She'll learn some words. She'll fall in love with cretins. Dolts a sweet talker on his way to jail. And you, your wife, get old, fly blown, and rue nothing. You did, you loved, your feet are sore. It's dusk. Your daughter's tall. Jeffrey's the only man that we always tell each other we love each other when we talk on the phone. Most of you know this has been a very special week for me because my daughter is here in a fiction class, and I was maybe the only person to get to spend Father's Day this week with their kid, and then to be with her all week. And she's an alum, and she's just thrilled to be back. Loved her class with Adele, and this has been really sweet. Yeah, you, baby. And I love you, Jeffrey. I saw a piece of graffiti outside of Asheville, North Carolina, some years ago, and it was in a very inaccessible place on an overpass on a highway, and it said in giant letters in spray paint, "I love you, Sweatheart." And that's the name of this poem. I love you, Sweatheart. A man risked his life to write the words. A man hung upside down, an idiot friend holding his legs, with spray paint to write the words on a girder 50 feet above a highway. And his beloved, the next morning, driving to work. His words are not meant to be so unique. Does she recognize his handwriting? Did he hint to her at her doorstep the night before of something special, darling, tomorrow? And did he call her at work, expecting her to faint with delight at his celebration of her, his passion, his risk? She will know I love her now. The world will know my love for her. A man risked his life to write the words. Love is like this at the bone. We hope love is like this, Sweatheart, all sore and dumb and dangerous, ignited, blessed, always, regardless. No exceptions, always in blazing matters like these, blessed. So I make fun of that guy because he's doing something really stupid, but he's doing it for love.